First speaker this evening is Erin Bailey. Erin, you want to come on up? Erin has had the great fortune of living all over the world, and she currently calls Ottawa, Ontario, Canada home. She is a sociology major and our first Bonner to graduate with the revised civic engagement and social justice minor. Erin's Bonner site is the Mary M. Torgler Fine Arts Center.
Thank you, Vanessa. This is delightful, isn't it? I've always wanted to have a dinner in here, and 2 years of COVID later, here I am. How exciting. Well, home is a fairly complicated concept for me. I never know how to respond when someone asks me where I'm from. It seems like a pretty straightforward question, and I imagine for most people it is. But as a student, meeting new people, it's one I just haven't been able to get away from. If you rounded up everyone I've introduced myself to over the last 3 years and asked them where I call home, you'd get a pretty wide variety of answers. Some would say Virginia, which is fair, I was born here. Others would say Kuwait or Bahrain, then we'd get to Nairobi, then West Virginia, and finally Ottawa, which is what it says in your programs. But none of those answers would really be true, because none of those places really do feel like home. My family returned to the US from Nairobi a week before my first day at CNU. I was jet-lagged and homesick and frankly pretty miserable. Not to mention overwhelmed by the sheer size of grocery stores here, which let me tell you are still a doozy. There are so many options. But when new friends and well-meaning professors looking for a fun fact asked me where I was from, most of the time I ended up saying, Virginia. I don't feel like a Virginian. I have no family here. But I discovered pretty quick that that answer saved me from the looks of confusion and the uncomfortable questions. In short, it was the easy way out. I bring this up now because my lack of a physical hometown is something I felt acutely during my time as a Bonner. I haven't had somewhere familiar to go back to, or a constant community of people who have been there since childhood. I spent a long time being wrapped in the place aspect of home. But the past 3 years have taught me that home is less of a house than it is a community. When I think of home now, I think of stability and of being known and seen and understood. As Bonners, we seek to be consistent in our service. We go to our sites for hours every week after week, for 4 years, in my case 3. We do this because we are passionate about the communities we serve and the skills that we bring to the table. And I think I would be lying to pretend that we never get burnt out. Being caught up in the action of service can push the why of service farther from our minds, occupied as we are with logging hours and checking boxes. Service burnout is just as real as academic burnout. And as the seniors here know, burnout tends to affect the quality of the work that we produce. After fitting 4 years of college into 3, I've become tired of turning in assignments and meeting deadlines. And as these activities increase in urgency, serving may seem like just another responsibility that we have to get through. But when we are tired and burnt out and uninspired, listening is often the best thing that we have to offer. I've always loved art. My mom was a portrait artist, so our houses have always been filled with canvases and the smell of turpentine. And hours of my childhood were spent sitting still so she could get just the right angle. I grew up with a mother who saw beauty everywhere she went, who sought it out and reflected it and wanted others to see the same. The advantage of this, and of our constant moving, was that she managed to find art and artists in the most unsuspecting places. She was always talking to people, asking them questions, finding galleries and craftsmen, and inevitably driving away with a trunk full of painted wood or Persian rugs. On one such occasion, during a brief homeschooling stunt in Manama, we spent hours in a Sunni village, learning how to throw clay on the wheel and carve out traditional Islamic designs. I still struggle with long division, which she really should have been teaching me, but to be immersed in a culture that puts so much stock into preserving and teaching their art was worth way more than an A on my math test. We weren't painting walls at afternoon, bringing bags of clothes, or donating money, but we were listening. Listening to artists talk about what fueled them, their fathers and grandfathers that taught them their trade, smiling at the wives who pour tea and admiring the glittering shards of colored glass hanging in the window. We were sitting in the kind of community that you see on the news, the ones that look impoverished, dusty, neglected, and still the most important thing that we did was listen. It is noble to enter an unfamiliar place and set out to make a difference. That is exactly what I did what I hoped I would do when I applied to be a Bonner, and it is still a goal that I have for my work. But it is equally as noble and sometimes more difficult to enter a place and simply be still and listen. When we already have an idea of what making a difference looks like, it's hard and sometimes painful to admit that our way just might not be the right way. I like to see the physical results of my service, which is probably one of the reasons I'm drawn to art. To create something from scratch is immensely satisfying, and it activates parts of our brain that we don't usually use in day-to-day work. When I started serving at the Peninsula Fine Arts Center, I had lofty ideas of the kinds of projects that I wanted to work on and the programs that I wanted to implement. And then I discovered that they were closing. So, instead of connecting with artists and working on exciting new shows, I organized the archives. Boxes and boxes and more boxes of archives. And although that work wasn't glamorous, and it certainly was not exciting, I spent those hours talking with the women who ran PFAC, learning about their work and gaining knowledge on the history of the arts in Newport News. I learned how important art is to this community, how expression has taken the form of dance, of music, of sculpture. But I also learned that the arts have been somewhat of a novelty, expensive and difficult to access for so many of our residents. It is often the case that low socioeconomic status and minority families get stuck behind museum fees and membership programs, policies that help art facilities stay afloat, but also turn the fine arts into a medium that can only be enjoyed by a privileged few. When I came to the Torgler Fine Arts Center, I knew I wanted to change that. My year at PFAC, listening and going through those boxes, taught me not only what our community has seen in the past, but also what is desperately needed. We need art and artists that represent who we are, where we came from, and what we hope to be. Art that goes beyond beauty and speaks to our unique experiences. Art that is not just paintings done by famous white men, although those too have their place. Because if you go out and you look around, art is not a community of only white men. For my civic engagement and social justice capstone, I talk about the idea of creative placemaking. Creative placemaking refers to the ways that art can be used to shape the identity of a location and unite its people, serving as a kind of community catalyst. This doesn't occur from just walking through galleries, but begins with intentional community outreach and engagement. My goal for working at the Torgler was to create a space conducive to this kind of placemaking, to have an institution that can feel like home, even for those that find home to be a little bit complicated. When we view and interact with art that reflects ourselves, we gain a more intimate understanding of who we are. We feel safe and seen and accepted. Feelings that, to me, represent being home. Something similar occurs when we view the unfamiliar, art reflective of a culture or environment that is not our own. These are equally as important. We all deserve to witness things of beauty that we connect to. But we would be incomplete without also expanding our minds to understand that art is challenging and new, and by relation, working to understand people and places completely unknown to us. This isn't something that can be achieved in 1 year or by one person. I'll be working at the Torgler next year, and although I'm not sure what that will look like yet, I know I will have the same goal as when I started. I'm so grateful to be working in an environment that supports the arts and seeks to broaden their reach, especially somewhere with the resources that Christopher Newport University has. Thank you.